Welcome to HFY Stories. If you're ready for jaw-dropping stories and a universe full of excitement, hit that subscribe button like it's the big red button in a space opera. Give us a like if you're feeling that interstellar vibe and comment below to join the conversation. We want to hear from you. Yes, you, the spacefarer with a great story idea, or just a fan of epic human victories. The Unlikely Bond. The Galactic Alliance had always been a melting pot of diverse species, each bringing its own strengths and weaknesses to the table. Yet, despite centuries of peaceful coexistence, there were still unspoken rules about interspecies interactions. You could be friendly, even allies, but family? That was a concept most couldn't grasp until humans arrived. Lorna Vashti, a young diplomat from the Andorian species, found herself aboard the Terran flagship Resolute. Her mission was simple: negotiate a trade agreement between her people and the humans. However, Lorna's mind wasn't on the negotiations. She was haunted by a recent loss, the unexpected death of her younger brother, Yorin, during a skirmish on the outer colonies. The Resolute was an impressive vessel, its halls bustling with activity as the crew prepared for another diplomatic mission. Lorna was used to the grandeur of starships, but something about this one felt different. The humans weren't just efficient. They were warm, welcoming, almost familial. Captain Aaron Hayes, a tall, imposing figure with a warm smile, greeted Lorna in the ship's main atrium. "Ambassador Vashti, welcome aboard. I hope your journey was pleasant." "It was, Captain," Lorna replied, her voice measured and professional. "I appreciate your hospitality." As they walked through the ship, Lorna noticed how the crew interacted with one another. There was a camaraderie, a sense of belonging that was rare in such a hierarchical environment. It reminded her of home, of Yorin. The thought brought a pang of sadness, and she quickly pushed it aside. Over the next few days, negotiations proceeded smoothly. The humans were direct but fair, and Lorna found herself admiring their straightforward approach. Still, something nagged at her. There was an underlying tension aboard the Resolute, something unspoken that hung in the air. It wasn't until she overheard a conversation between two crew members that she realized what it was. "Have you heard from command about the rescue mission?" one of them asked, his voice hushed. "No word yet," the other replied, shaking his head. "But you know how it is. If they're out there, we'll find them." Lorna's curiosity was piqued. She approached Captain Hayes later that day, careful to keep her tone neutral. "Captain, I couldn't help but overhear some of your crew discussing a rescue mission. Is everything all right?" Hayes hesitated, his usual confident demeanor faltering for a moment. "It's complicated, Ambassador. We lost contact with a civilian transport ship near the frontier. It was carrying some of our own, families of the crew. We've been trying to locate them, but so far, no luck." Lorna felt a surge of empathy. "I'm sorry to hear that, Captain. If there's anything I can do to assist." "Thank you, Ambassador, but this is a human matter. We don't want to involve others in our problems." Lorna nodded, though she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. She spent the next few days observing the crew more closely, and what she saw only deepened her curiosity. The humans were driven, almost obsessively so, but there was also a profound sense of care, not just for their missing comrades, but for one another. It wasn't until a chance encounter with Lieutenant Mia Carter, the ship's chief engineer, that Lorna began to understand the depth of that care. Carter was a no-nonsense woman with a sharp wit and an even sharper tongue. Lorna found herself in the ship's engineering bay, watching the crew work on some repairs. Carter noticed her presence and approached with a raised eyebrow. "Ambassador, what brings you down here? Looking to get your hands dirty?" Lorna smiled politely. "Just observing. I've always been fascinated by human technology." Carter snorted. "Fascinated, huh? Well, it's nothing fancy, but it gets the job done." There was a pause, and then Carter's expression softened slightly. I heard about your brother, Ambassador. I'm sorry for your loss. Lorna stiffened, not expecting the sudden shift in conversation. Thank you, she replied quietly. Carter nodded, her gaze distant. Losses, it's a part of life, but it never gets easier. I lost my husband a few years back. He was a pilot, brilliant one too. But one day, he just didn't come back. Took me a long time to accept it. Lorna looked at Carter, seeing the pain in her eyes. I'm sorry. I didn't know. It's all right, Carter said, their voice steady. The thing is, when you lose someone, you realize how important family is. And family, well, it doesn't always mean blood. Sometimes it's the people who stand by you, no matter what. Lorna pondered Carter's words long after their conversation ended. The human sense of family went beyond mere biology. It was about connection, loyalty, and an unbreakable bond forged in the fires of adversity. And as the days passed, Lorna couldn't help but wonder, what would happen if the humans decided she was part of that family too? The storm on the horizon. The Resolute continued its journey through the vast expanse of space, its crew now more determined than ever to find the missing transport ship. The tension that Lorna had sensed earlier was palpable, growing thicker with each passing day. Despite the ongoing negotiations, the humans' focus was clearly divided, their concern for their missing loved ones overshadowing everything else. Lorna found herself drawn into their world, spending more time with the crew and learning about their lives, their stories. She had never felt so connected to another species before, but the humans had a way of breaking down barriers that she hadn't anticipated. It was both unsettling and comforting. One evening, after a long day of talks, Lorna was in her quarters when her door chimed. She opened it to find Captain Hayes standing there, a somber expression on his face. Ambassador Vashti, may I come in? He asked, his voice unusually subdued. Of course, Captain, Lorna replied, stepping aside to let him enter. Hayes took a seat at the small table in her quarters, his gaze distant. I wanted to talk to you about the situation with the missing transport. Lorna sat down across from him, her curiosity piqued. What is it, Captain? We've received word from command, Hayes began, his tone heavy. They've authorized a search and rescue mission, but it's risky. The last known location of the transport was near a region of space known as the Maelstrom, a volatile area with unpredictable gravitational anomalies. It's dangerous, but we can't just leave them out there. Lorna's heart sank. She had heard of the Maelstrom, a treacherous region that few ships dared to enter. And you're going in? Hayes nodded. We don't have a choice. Those people are our families. We have to try. Lorna's mind raced. The Maelstrom was a death trap, but she knew the humans wouldn't be dissuaded. Captain, if you're going to do this, let me help. The Andorian fleet has advanced navigation technology that could assist in navigating the Maelstrom. Hayes looked at her, surprise flickering in his eyes. You'd be willing to risk that for us? Lorna hesitated, then nodded. I've seen how much this means to you and your crew. You've treated me like one of your own, and I can't stand by and do nothing. Hayes studied her for a moment, then gave a small, grateful smile. Thank you, Ambassador. I'll inform command and see if we can get the necessary clearances. As Hayes left her quarters, Lorna felt a mixture of fear and resolve. She had just volunteered to enter one of the most dangerous regions in the galaxy, all for the sake of people who weren't even her own. But as she had come to understand, to the humans, family wasn't defined by species. And perhaps, just perhaps, she was beginning to feel the same way. The preparations for the mission were intense. The Resolute's crew worked tirelessly to ready the ship for the dangerous journey ahead. Lorna coordinated with her own people, arranging for a small detachment of Andorian ships to join the rescue effort. The combined forces would give them a better chance of surviving the Maelstrom's unpredictable dangers. As the day of departure approached, the ship's atmosphere grew tense, a mixture of anticipation and dread hanging over everyone. Lorna found herself spending more time with the crew, bonding with them in ways she hadn't expected. There were late-night discussions in the mess hall, shared stories of lost loved ones, and even a few moments of levity that provided much-needed relief from the looming threat. One such moment occurred when Lorna found herself in the ship's recreation room, watching a group of crew members play a game of cards. Lieutenant Carter, who had become something of a confidant, was among them, her sharp wit keeping everyone on their toes. "Ambassador," Carter called out as Lorna entered. "Care to join us? We could use a fresh pair of eyes to keep these cheaters in line." Lorna chuckled, shaking her head. "I'm afraid I'm not much of a card player, but I'll watch." Carter grinned, motioning for Lorna to take a seat. "Suit yourself, but don't say I didn't warn you. This lot will try to rope you in the moment you're not looking." The game continued, and Lorna found herself relaxing in the company of the crew. For a brief moment, the worries about the mission and the maelstrom faded into the background. She realized that she had grown fond of these humans, their resilience and their unwavering loyalty to one another. But the reprieve was short-lived. The next day, the Resolute and its Andorian allies set course for the maelstrom, their mission clear: find the missing transport and bring their people home, no matter the cost. As they approached the maelstrom, the ship's sensors began picking up the first signs of the gravitational anomalies that made the region so dangerous. The viewscreen showed the swirling, chaotic mass of space ahead, a terrifyingly beautiful sight that sent shivers down Lorna's spine. "All hands, brace for turbulence," Hayes' voice echoed through the ship's intercom. "We're entering the maelstrom." The ship lurched as it crossed the threshold, the gravitational forces tugging at the hull. The crew worked feverishly to keep the ship steady, their faces etched with determination. Lorna watched from the bridge, her heart pounding as the Resolute plunged deeper into the chaos. For hours, they navigated the treacherous terrain, the ship's systems pushed to their limits. The Andorian ships provided crucial support, their advanced sensors helping to plot a safe course through the storm. But just when it seemed like they were making progress, a sudden spike in gravitational forces sent the Resolute spiraling off course. "Emergency thrusters, now!" Hayes shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. The crew scrambled to regain control, but the ship was being pulled toward a massive gravitational anomaly, a swirling vortex that threatened to tear them apart. "Captain, we're losing power to the main engines," one of the officers called out. "Devote all power to the shields," Hayes ordered. "We need to hold together long enough to—" Before he could finish, the ship was jolted violently, sending Lorna crashing to the floor. Alarms blared as the Resolute was caught in the vortex's grip, its hull groaning under the strain. "Ambassador, hold on!" Carter's voice rang out as she rushed to Lorna's side. Lorna clung to a nearby console, her heart racing. The ship was being pulled deeper into the vortex, and for a terrifying moment, it seemed like all was lost. But then, against all odds, the Andorian ships managed to stabilize the Resolute, pulling it free from the vortex's clutches. The ship limped out of the maelstrom, battered but intact. The crew erupted into cheers, relief flooding the bridge. But the celebration was short-lived as the viewscreen flickered, revealing the wreckage of the missing transport ship just ahead. Lorna's breath caught in her throat. The ship was badly damaged, its hull breached in several places. But as the Resolute drew closer, the sensors picked up faint life signs. "They're alive," Hayes said, his voice filled with a mix of hope and determination. "Prepare to launch rescue teams. We're bringing them home." Lorna watched as the rescue teams were deployed, her heart swelling with a sense of pride and belonging. The humans had risked everything to save their own, and in doing so, they had shown her the true meaning of family. As the survivors were brought aboard, Lorna couldn't help but think that, in some small way, she had become part of that family too. The boundless horizon. The survivors from the wrecked transport ship were a mix of civilians and crew members, their faces etched with exhaustion and relief as they were brought aboard the Resolute. The ship's medical bay buzzed with activity as doctors and nurses worked tirelessly to tend to the injured. Lorna watched from a distance, her heart heavy with the weight of what they had all been through. As she stood in the corridor outside the medical bay, Captain Hayes approached her, his expression one of weary gratitude. "Ambassador Vashti, I wanted to thank you personally. Without your help, we wouldn't have made it through the maelstrom. You saved lives today." Lorna shook her head modestly. "It was a joint effort, Captain. Your crew is remarkable, and the Andorian fleet was honored to assist. I'm just glad we were able to bring them home." Hayes nodded, his eyes reflecting the same sentiment. "Home, that's a word that carries a lot of weight for us. We may be far from Earth, but out here, this ship, these people, they're our family. And today, I think we proved that family isn't just about where you're from. It's about who you're willing to stand with, no matter the odds." Lorna felt a warmth in her chest at his words. She had always believed in the strength of her people, in the bonds that held them together. But the humans had shown her something different, something deeper. It wasn't just about shared history or bloodlines. It was about the choices you made, the people you chose to care for, even if they weren't your own. The days following the rescue were a blur of repairs and recovery. The Resolute limped away from the maelstrom, its systems strained but functional. The Andorian ships provided additional support, ensuring the flagship made it back to friendly space. Lorna continued to assist where she could, finding herself increasingly integrated into the crew's routines. One evening, as the ship approached a secure outpost for much-needed repairs, Lorna was summoned to the captain's quarters. She entered to find Hayes and Lieutenant Carter deep in discussion over a holographic map of the region. "Ambassador, glad you could join us," Hayes said, motioning for her to take a seat. "We've been discussing our next steps." Lorna nodded, her curiosity piqued. "Is there something new on the horizon?" "More like an old threat rearing its head," Carter interjected, her tone serious. "We've received intel that the Ralka, a hostile species known for their piracy, have been active in this sector. They've been preying on civilian ships, and there's reason to believe they may have been responsible for what happened to the transport we just rescued." Lorna frowned. The Ralka were notorious in the galaxy, their brutal tactics leaving a trail of destruction wherever they went. If the Ralka are involved, then we're dealing with a much larger threat. What's the plan? Hayes exchanged a glance with Carter before answering. "We're planning a counter-offensive. The Ralka have established a base of operations on a nearby moon, and we believe it's the staging ground for their attacks. We're going to take it out, but we'll need all the help we can get. I'm hoping the Andorian fleet will stand with us again." Lorna didn't hesitate. "The Andorian fleet will be there, Captain. We've faced the Ralka before, and we know how to handle them. They won't know what hit them." A steely determination settled over the room as the plan began to take shape. The combined forces of the Resolute and the Andorian fleet would strike the Ralka base swiftly and decisively, aiming to cripple their operations and send a message to the rest of the galaxy that such predations would not be tolerated. The mission was launched 2 days later. The Resolute led the charge, flanked by the sleek, agile Andorian ships. The Ralka base, hidden deep within a massive asteroid field, was heavily fortified. But the humans and Andorians were undeterred. They had faced the maelstrom together. They could face this. As the fleet approached the asteroid field, Lorna was once again on the bridge of the Resolute, her presence now a familiar and welcome sight. The tension was thick as the ships maneuvered through the treacherous field, dodging massive rocks and navigating the Ralka's automated defenses. "Engage cloaking protocols," Hayes ordered, his voice calm and controlled. "We'll get as close as we can before they realize we're here." The fleet slipped into stealth mode, their ships vanishing from sensors as they closed in on the Ralka base. Lorna watched the tactical display, her mind focused on the task at hand. This was no longer just a mission. It was a statement. The Ralka had taken too much, hurt too many. It was time to end their reign of terror. The first wave of attacks was swift and brutal. The Resolute's cannons rode to life, unleashing a barrage of firepower that tore through the Ralco's outer defenses. The Andorian ships followed suit, their precision strikes taking out key installations with surgical efficiency. The Ralco, caught off guard by the ferocity of the assault, scrambled to mount a defense, but it was too late. The combined forces of the humans and Andorians overwhelmed them, pressing the advantage with relentless determination. Lorna marveled at the coordination, the seamless integration of their tactics. It was as if they had been fighting side by side for years. Incoming fighters. Carter called out, her fingers flying over the controls. They're launching everything they've got. The viewscreen filled with the sight of Ralco fighters swarming toward the fleet, their weapons blazing. The Resolute's turrets pivoted, locking onto the incoming targets and firing with deadly accuracy. The Andorian ships wove through the chaos, their agile movements outmaneuvering the enemy at every turn. But the Ralco were nothing if not tenacious. Their fighters pressed the attack, forcing the fleet into a fierce dogfight amid the asteroid field. Lorna's heart pounded as the ship shuddered under the strain of the battle, but she remained calm, her focus unwavering. "Keep up the pressure," Hayes shouted over the comms. "We've got them on the ropes." The Resolute and the Andorian fleet pushed forward, driving the Ralco back toward their base. Explosions lit up the asteroid field as ships on both sides were destroyed, the wreckage drifting through space like silent witnesses to the carnage. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the Ralco's defenses crumbled. The fleet's assault had taken its toll, and the enemy's forces were in disarray. Hayes seized the moment, ordering the final strike on the base itself. "Target their command center," he instructed, his voice cold as steel. "Let's finish this." The Resolute's main cannons powered up, their energy building to a critical mass. Lorna watched as the ship lined up the shot, the tension in the air almost unbearable. And then, with a deafening roar, the cannons fired. The Ralco command center erupted in a blinding explosion, the shockwave rippling through the asteroid field. The surviving Ralco ships scattered, fleeing in every direction as the fleet's victory became undeniable. A cheer went up from the crew as the last of the Ralco forces were driven away. The battle was over, and the day belonged to the humans and Andorians. Lorna felt a surge of pride, not just in her own people, but in the unity they had forged with the humans. Together, they had faced the storm and emerged victorious. As the fleet regrouped and prepared to head back to safer space, Lorna stood on the bridge of the Resolute, looking out at the stars. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but she knew one thing for sure. She had found a new family among these humans, a bond that transcended species and borders. And as long as they stood together, there was nothing they couldn't face. The ties that bind. The aftermath of the battle left the Resolute and its crew in a state of both triumph and exhaustion. The Ralco base lay in ruins, and the threat they posed to the sector had been decisively neutralized. But as the fleet made its way back to the secure outpost, the weight of what they had accomplished began to sink in. Lorna Vashti stood on the observation deck, watching as the stars drifted past. The rush of adrenaline that had fueled her during the battle was fading, leaving her with a profound sense of weariness. Yet, beneath that weariness was something else, an unmistakable feeling of belonging. She had fought alongside the humans, shared in their victories and their losses. And in doing so, she had become part of something larger than herself. It was a feeling she hadn't expected, one that had crept up on her gradually, but now that it was here, she couldn't imagine going back to the way things were before. The door to the observation deck slid open, and Lorna turned to see Captain Hayes entering, his expression reflective. He joined her at the viewport, the two of them standing in companionable silence for a moment. "It's beautiful out here," Hayes remarked quietly, his gaze fixed on the endless expanse of space. "Even after all these years, I never get tired of it." Lorna nodded, understanding what he meant. There's something about the stars that reminds us of how small we are, and yet how much we can accomplish when we work together. Hayes smiled at that, a hint of warmth in his eyes. I couldn't have said it better myself, Ambassador. And speaking of working together, I wanted to thank you again. You and your people played a crucial role in this victory. We couldn't have done it without you. Lorna felt a pang of emotion at his words. She had never been one for grand speeches, but she knew she needed to say something. Captain, I never expected to feel this way. When I first came aboard, I was focused on my mission, on representing my people. But over these past weeks, I've come to realize that there's more to this than just duty. I've found a home here, among your crew. And I've learned that family isn't just about where you come from. It's about the connections you make, the people you choose to stand with. Hayes looked at her, his expression softening. Lorna, you're part of this family now. You've earned your place here, not just as an ambassador, but as a friend. And that's something that transcends rank or species. For a moment, Lorna couldn't find the words to respond. The emotions swirling within her were too complex, too raw. But she didn't need to say anything. Hayes' words had said it all. As they stood there, side by side, a message came through on the ship's comms, interrupting the quiet moment. Hayes reached for his earpiece, listening intently as a report was relayed to him. Captain, we've received a communication from Andorian Command, the voice said. They're requesting an update on the mission and are offering additional support if needed. Hayes glanced at Lorna, raising an eyebrow. Well, Ambassador, it looks like your people are still eager to lend a hand. How should we respond? Lorna considered the question, her thoughts drifting back to the recent battle. The Andorians had been instrumental in the victory, their advanced technology and strategic prowess complementing the humans' tenacity and resourcefulness. The partnership had been effective, and it was clear that both sides had much to gain from continuing to work together. Let them know we've succeeded in neutralizing the Ralcal threat, Lorna replied, her voice firm. And tell them that the bond we've forged here is something worth preserving. We may be from different worlds, but we've proven that we're stronger together. I'll recommend to my superiors that we continue to explore joint operations with the Terran fleet. Hayes nodded, clearly pleased with her decision. I couldn't agree more. This alliance has the potential to change the course of history, and I'm glad to have you as a part of it. The communication ended, leaving Lorna and Hayes once again in the quiet of the observation deck. But this time, the silence was filled with a sense of purpose, of shared understanding. As the days passed, the fleet made its way back to the outpost, where they would resupply and make necessary repairs. The mood aboard the Resolute was one of cautious optimism. The battle with the Ralca had been hard fought, but the victory had strengthened the bonds between the humans and the Andorians, creating a foundation for a partnership that could shape the future of the galaxy. Lorna spent much of her time in the company of the crew, continuing to learn about their customs, their history, and their values. The more she interacted with them, the more she realized how much they had in common, despite their differences. There was a shared resilience, a determination to protect those they cared about, and an unwavering belief in the importance of unity. It was during one of these moments, while she was sharing a meal with Lieutenant Carter and a few other crew members in the mess hall, that the conversation took a more personal turn. So, Ambassador, Carter began, her tone light but curious. I've been wondering, what do your people think of us humans? I mean, really think. The question caught Lorna off guard, but she smiled, appreciating the honesty. Well, I can't speak for all Andorians, but I can tell you what I've observed. At first, many of us were unsure of how to approach your species. Humans are different. You're unpredictable, emotional, sometimes even reckless. But you're also incredibly resourceful, adaptable, and fiercely loyal. It's hard not to admire those qualities. Carter grinned. I'll take that as a compliment. But I've got to ask, What about you? Do you think you'll stick around with us once all this is over? Lorna hesitated, the question stirring something deep within her. She had thought about it, of course, what her future might hold after the mission was complete. Would she return to her homeworld, resume her duties as an ambassador, and leave this newfound family behind? Or was there another path she could take, one that kept her connected to the people she had come to care for? I'm not sure yet, Lorna admitted, her voice thoughtful. But I do know this, whatever happens, I want to continue building on what we've started here. I believe our two peoples have a lot to offer each other, and I want to be a part of that. Whether that means staying with the Terran fleet or finding another way to bridge the gap between our worlds, I'm open to the possibilities. The crew members around the table nodded in agreement, their expressions reflecting the same hopefulness that Lorna felt. It was clear that the bond they had formed was something special, something that went beyond mere duty or obligation. As the days turned into weeks, the repairs to the Resolute were completed, and the ship was once again ready to embark on new missions. But before they could depart, a formal ceremony was held at the outpost to honor the fallen and to recognize the efforts of those who had fought in the battle against the Ralkor. Lorna stood alongside Captain Hayes and Lieutenant Carter as medals were awarded and speeches were given. The ceremony was a solemn reminder of the cost of war, but it was also a celebration of the resilience and courage that had brought them through the darkest moments. When it was Lorna's turn to speak, she stepped forward, her gaze sweeping over the assembled crowd. "We have all lost something in this conflict," she began, her voice steady. "But we have also gained something invaluable, a bond that transcends species, that unites us in our common cause. I have learned much from my time with the Terran fleet, and I have seen firsthand the strength that comes from standing together. As we move forward, let us remember that it is our unity, our shared purpose, that will guide us through whatever challenges lie ahead. And let us never forget that we are stronger together than we could ever be apart." The crowd erupted into applause, and Lorna felt a swell of pride and gratitude. She had found her place among these humans, and in doing so, she had discovered a new sense of purpose, a new definition of family. As the ceremony concluded, and the crew began to disperse, Lorna found herself standing with Captain Hayes and Lieutenant Carter, the three of them looking out at the stars. "Well, Ambassador," Hayes said, a hint of amusement in his voice, "what's next for you? Ready to embark on another adventure?" Lorna smiled, her heart light with the possibilities that lay before her. "I think I am, Captain, and I wouldn't want to face it with anyone else." As the Resolute prepared to depart on its next mission, Lorna knew that whatever the future held, she would face it with the family she had chosen, the humans who had shown her that true strength came not from where you were born, but from the ties that bound you to those who stood by your side. The unbroken circle. The Resolute left the outpost, heading into the unknown reaches of space. With each passing light year, Lorna Vashti felt a growing sense of peace. The crew had faced unimaginable challenges, and through it all, they had become something more than just a team. They had become a family. As the ship moved further from the safety of the outpost, the sense of calm was replaced by an underlying tension. Though the Ralkor had been dealt a significant blow, the galaxy was still a dangerous place, filled with countless threats and mysteries. The unknown loomed large on the horizon, but Lorna knew that she would not face it alone. She had chosen to stay with the Terran fleet, to continue her journey alongside the humans who had shown her the true meaning of unity. The Andorians had agreed to extend her mission indefinitely, recognizing the importance of maintaining their newfound alliance. It was a decision that had filled her with both excitement and uncertainty, but she knew it was the right one. As the days turned into weeks, the crew settled into a new routine. The ship's next mission was to explore a distant sector that had recently come onto the radar due to anomalous readings. The sector was largely uncharted, and the readings suggested the presence of a massive structure of unknown origin. The mission was risky, but the potential rewards were too great to ignore. Lorna spent much of her time in the ship's library, researching everything she could about the sector they were heading into. The more she learned, the more intrigued she became. The structure, if it existed, could be a relic from an ancient civilization, one that had long since vanished from the galaxy. Such a discovery could change everything they knew about the history of the universe. One evening, as she was poring over a particularly dense tome, Captain Hayes entered the library. He looked tired but determined, his uniform slightly rumpled from a long day on the bridge. "Lorna," he greeted, his voice carrying a note of warmth that had become familiar. "Burning the midnight oil again, I see." She smiled, closing the book she had been reading. "I've always been a bit of a night owl. Besides, there's so much to learn about where we're headed. I want to be prepared." Hayes nodded, taking a seat across from her. "You and me both. This mission, it's different from anything we've faced before. There's a lot riding on it, and not just for us. The entire fleet is watching." Lorna could sense the weight of command in his words, the burden of responsibility that came with leading others into the unknown. "Captain, you don't have to shoulder all of this alone. We're in this together, remember? That's what family does." Hayes chuckled, though there was a seriousness beneath it. "You're right, of course. It's hard not to feel the pressure sometimes. But having you here, having the Andorians by our side, it makes a difference. We're stronger together, and I won't forget that." Their conversation was interrupted by the sudden blare of the ship's alarm. Both Lorna and Hayes were on their feet in an instant, moving quickly toward the bridge. The tension that had been simmering beneath the surface now boiled over as the crew scrambled to respond to the emergency. When they arrived on the bridge, Lieutenant Carter was already at her station, her hands flying over the controls as she analyzed the situation. "Captain, we just picked up a massive energy signature coming from the direction of the structure. It's like nothing we've ever seen before." Hayes moved to his command chair, his expression a mix of concern and determination. "Can you identify the source?" Carter shook her head. "Not yet, but whatever it is, it's powerful. We're talking levels of energy that could easily destroy a fleet. We need to approach with extreme caution." Lorna felt a chill run down her spine. The unknown structure had always been an enigma, but now it was clear that they were dealing with something far more dangerous than they had anticipated. "Captain, if that structure is a weapon or a trap, we could be walking into a death sentence." Hayes didn't respond immediately, his mind clearly racing through the possibilities. Finally he spoke, his voice calm, but resolute. "We have a mission to complete, but we're not going to take unnecessary risks. Lieutenant, prepare to launch a reconnaissance drone. I want eyes on that structure before we make any decisions." The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, and within minutes, the drone was deployed. The tension was palpable as they waited for the drone to transmit its findings. Every second felt like an eternity, the uncertainty gnawing at everyone on the bridge. Finally, the drone's feed came online, displaying a live image of the structure on the main view screen. The sight that greeted them was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The structure was colossal, a monolithic construct that defied comprehension. It floated in the void like a silent sentinel, its surface smooth and featureless, save for the faint glow of energy coursing through its veins. It was ancient, far older than anything the crew had ever encountered, and it exuded an aura of raw, untamed power. "It's beautiful," Lorna whispered, unable to tear her eyes away from the screen. But beneath the beauty, there was something ominous, something that sent a shiver down her spine. Carter's voice broke through the silence. "Captain, I'm detecting massive energy fluctuations within the structure. It's like the whole thing is waking up." Hayes frowned, his instincts screaming that something was wrong. "Pull the drone back. We're not going to get caught off guard." But it was too late. The structure pulsed with a sudden surge of energy, and the drone's feed went dark. An alarm blared as the ship's systems began to fluctuate, the lights flickering ominously. "We're being scanned," Carter shouted, her voice laced with urgency. The structure is scanning us. Hayes reacted instantly. All hands, brace for impact. Evasive maneuvers. The Resolute lurched as the ship's engines rode to life, trying to break free from whatever force had latched onto them. But the structure's grip was relentless, pulling them closer with each passing moment. Lorna felt the ship shudder beneath her feet, the sheer power of the structure's energy overwhelming the Resolute's systems. The crew fought desperately to regain control, but it was clear they were outmatched. "Captain, we're losing power," Carter reported, her voice filled with dread. "At this rate, we're not going to make it out of here." Hayes clenched his fists, his mind racing for a solution. But before he could give an order, the structure released them. The ship suddenly lurched back, its systems slowly returning to normal as the mysterious force faded. Everyone on the bridge took a breath, the tension still thick in the air. Lorna glanced at the viewscreen, expecting to see the structure looming closer, but instead, it remained stationary, its surface as calm and silent as before. "What just happened?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Carter checked her readings, her expression one of confusion. It's letting us go. I didn't understand why, but the structure has disengaged. We're free." Hayes didn't waste any time. "Helm, get us out of here. Maximum speed. I don't want to stick around to find out if it changes its mind." The Resolute's engines rode to life once more, and the ship began to pull away from the structure. The crew worked in near silence, the shock of what had just happened still hanging over them. As the ship sped away, Lorna couldn't shake the feeling that they had just come face to face with something far beyond their understanding. The structure had shown them mercy, but why? What had it seen in them that made it decide to spare their lives? The questions swirled in her mind as they left the sector behind, the mystery of the structure haunting her thoughts. But despite the fear and uncertainty, there was a sense of relief, a sense that they had survived something extraordinary. The journey back to the outpost was uneventful, the crew slowly regaining their composure as they put the encounter behind them. But for Lorna, the experience had left an indelible mark. She had faced the unknown with her new family, and together, they had come through the ordeals stronger than ever. As they arrived at the outpost, Lorna stood on the observation deck once more, gazing out at the stars. The galaxy was vast and filled with dangers, but it was also filled with wonders beyond imagination. And as long as she had her family by her side, she knew they could face anything that came their way. Captain Hayes joined her, standing silently at her side. After a moment, he spoke, his voice filled with quiet resolve. "We may not have all the answers, Lorna, but we've got each other, and that's enough." Lorna nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "Yes, Captain, that's more than enough." The stars stretched out before them, an unbroken circle of light and darkness, of mystery and discovery. And together, they would continue to explore that endless frontier, as family, as allies, as one. The end.